Welcome to Boring Cinema. Tonight, we gently revisit the story of Inception. Settle in, relax, and let the film unfold slowly. The film begins with water and with a man's face pressed against sand. He opens his eyes. He says that the man has come back. The man with the gun is Cobb. The man at the other table is Saito. They are in a dream, though the film does not announce this, simply establishes it with the quality of a world that is slightly more saturated than the waking world, slightly more intense, slightly more deliberate in its physical textures, as though whoever designed this particular environment was very attentive to the sensory experience of being in it and wanted it to feel real in a way that reality sometimes does not quite feel. There is a third man at the table, a young man named Arthur, who is Cobb's partner, and who has done the technical work of building this particular dream environment for this particular job. The job is to extract something from Saito's mind. Extraction is what Cobb does. He enters people's dreams and takes things from them. Information, secrets, the contents of a specific safe in a specific dream room that corresponds to something real in the dreamer's waking life. He is very good at this. He is good in the way of someone who has been doing something for long enough that the expertise has become inseparable from the person, who no longer thinks about what they are doing in the way that beginners think about it, but who operates from a deep knowledge that is below the level of conscious deliberation. He goes into people's dreams and he takes what he was hired to take, and he does this with Arthur's help and with the help of a small team that changes from job to job depending on what the job requires. The extraction from Saito goes wrong. It goes wrong in the specific way that extraction can go wrong when the subject of the extraction knows about extraction, when the dreamer has been trained to recognize the signs of an intrusion into their dream and to respond to those signs with the defensive mechanisms that someone knowledgeable about dream work would put in place. Saito knew they were coming, not in the sense of expecting Cobb's team specifically, but in the broader sense of having prepared his dreaming mind against the possibility of exactly this kind of approach. The safe that Cobb reaches in Saito's dream contains the wrong information, a trap, a countermeasure, the specific response of a mind that has fortified itself against extraction. They go deeper. They go to a second level. The second level is a building in a storm, a collapsing environment, the dream beginning to break down. They wake up. They wake up on a train, the three of them, Cobb, Arthur, and the extraction target, who is both the mark and the person who controls the situation they are in. Saito tells them on the train that the extraction failed and that he knows it failed and that the information they took from the safe was what he intended them to take. He offers them something. Not retaliation for the intrusion into his dreaming mind, something else, something he has been building toward, something that requires exactly the kind of person that Cobb is and exactly the kind of skill that Cobb has. He wants Cobb's team to do inception instead of extraction. He wants them to plant an idea rather than take one. The difference between extraction and inception is the difference that structures everything else in the film. Extraction is the taking of something that exists, a secret, a memory, a combination, from a mind that contains it. Inception is the placement of something that does not exist, an idea, a conviction, a new orientation of the will, into a mind that will then carry it as though it originated there, as though the idea is native to the mind rather than planted in it from outside. Cobb says it is impossible. He has said this before to other people who have asked. He knows, because he has done it, that it is not impossible. He knows it is possible, and he knows exactly how dangerous it is, and he knows why no one who understands dream work will attempt it. Because the thing that makes Inception work is also the thing that makes it capable of doing irreversible damage to the mind that receives it. Saito's target is Robert Fisher, the son of a dying global energy magnate named Maurice Fisher, who is about to inherit his father's empire. Saito's business interests conflict with the continuation of the Fisher empire as currently constituted. And what he wants, planted in Robert Fisher's mind, is the idea to dissolve his father's company, not as an instruction, not as a directive, but as a genuine and authentic conviction arising apparently from Fisher's own emotional life that this is the right thing to do. The idea must feel native. It must feel like Fisher's own. It must plant itself deep enough that it will survive waking, survive the passage of time, survive whatever pressure Fisher's advisors and lawyers and competitors will put on him in the weeks after his father's death. It must be real. Cobb's reason for saying yes is the same reason he says yes to everything. He wants to go home. He has been exiled from the United States, separated from his children, who are living with his father-in-law in Los Angeles, by legal circumstances that make returning without resolution impossible. Someone has arranged to have him charged in connection with the death of his wife, and the charge means he cannot return without arrest, and he has not seen his children's faces for longer than he can afford to think about directly. Saito tells him that he has the connections to make the charges disappear. He tells Cobb that the reward for a successful inception is the ability to go home. Cobb assembles a team. He goes to Paris to find Yusuf, a chemist who can produce the compound that allows multiple dreamers to share a single dream at the required depth and for the required duration. The chemical foundation of everything the team is going to attempt. He finds Arthur, his usual point man, who manages the logistics and does the research. He finds Eames, a forger, a specialist who can impersonate specific people within dreams, who can take on the appearance and behavior of a person that the dreamer trusts, so that the forger can be in the dream as someone the dreamer will listen to. He finds Yusuf, and he finds Ariadne. Ariadne is a student, an architecture student, recommended by Cobb's father-in-law, Miles, as someone with the specific combination of creative intelligence and spatial thinking that the job of architect requires. In dream work, the architect is the person who builds the environment, who designs and constructs the spaces that the dream will unfold in, who creates the physical world that the dreamer will inhabit and move through and believe is real. The architect does not plant the idea. The architect builds the world in which the idea can be found. Cobb brings Ariadne into a dream to show her what the work is. They are sitting in a cafe in Paris, a real cafe in the real city, and then Cobb tells her to think of it differently, to treat it as a canvas, as something she can shape rather than simply be in. And she does, and the dream responds, and the city folds. This is the film's first fully spectacular sequence. And it earns its spectacle by arriving after the film has spent enough time establishing the rules of the world that the spectacle has a context. The folding Paris is not just impressive to look at, but specifically meaningful in the context of what has been established about how dreams work and what architects can do within them. The city folds along itself, buildings and streets meeting overhead, the Seine continuing to flow upside down above them. The geometry of the city reorganized without the reorganization, destroying the city's coherence. It is a dream. The dream world operates by the logic of its own making, and the maker can reshape the logic. Ariadne takes to the work with the eagerness of someone who has been given access to something that matches the specific shape of their interior capacity, who has found in the job she is being asked to do a domain that fits what she is. She builds dream spaces with growing confidence and growing ambition, and she also begins to understand through the process of building them something about Cobb that the rest of the team does not yet know. She builds a room with mirrors facing each other, and the room extends infinitely in both directions with the reflections of the two of them receding in both directions. And she turns to look at the reflections, and one of the reflections is wrong. One of the reflections contains a woman who is not Ariadne. A woman who is standing in the dream corridor with the quality of something that has not been invited, that does not belong in this particular construction, that is present in the dream, because someone's mind has brought her there rather than because the architect designed her. The woman is Mal, Cobb's wife. She has been dead for years in the waking world, and she is present in Cobb's dreams with a regularity and a force that exceeds what memory ordinarily does to the dead. She is there as a projection of his guilt and his grief, a projection that has taken on a life and a will of its own within the architecture of his dreaming. And she is dangerous. She does things in the dreams that projections of guilt do. She interferes, she destabilizes, she acts against the interests of whatever Cobb is trying to accomplish. She is the part of Cobb that has not resolved what happened and that cannot be left behind when he enters the dream world. The totems are introduced in the early preparation sequences, the small objects that each member of the team carries and that serve as the practical test of whether a given moment is a dream or a reality. A totem is a small object with a specific physical property that only its owner knows. Cobb's is the top, which in reality eventually slows and falls, but which, in a dream, spins indefinitely because the dreamed physics of the top will always produce the dreamlike behavior of the top rather than its actual physical behavior. Arthur's totem is a loaded die. Ariadne makes her own totem in the shape of a chess piece. The totem is the test, the personal instrument of verification. The small physical object whose behavior in any given moment can tell its owner whether they are in reality or in someone else's construction of reality. The film takes time before the main job begins to establish the rules of the dream world in enough detail that the audience can orient themselves in what is going to become an increasingly complex spatial and temporal structure. Dreams can be shared when the dreamers are connected through the compound Yusuf provides. Within a shared dream, there is subjective time that runs faster than real time. Approximately 20 minutes of real time produces roughly 6 hours of dream time, a ratio that multiplies with each additional dream layer, so that a dream within a dream produces not 12 hours, but something substantially longer. This is the mechanism that the Inception job requires. They need to go 3 levels deep, 3 dreams within dreams, because the idea they are planting needs to be planted in the deepest layer, the layer closest to Fisher's subconscious, where convictions form, rather than where they are received. Each level has a kick, a mechanism for waking the dreamers from that level and returning them to the level above. In the real world, the kick is the van hitting the water. The shock of the van going off the bridge produces in the dreamers a sensation strong enough to wake them from the first level. In the first level, the kick is a change in gravity, a specific spatial disruption that the dreamer experiences as a physical jolt. In the second level, it is an explosion. In the third level, it is something else. The kicks must be synchronized across the levels for the team to return together, which requires that the people at each level are aware of when the kick is coming at the level below them and are prepared to deliver their own kick at the right moment in the level above. The Mark's father dies. Maurice Fisher dies in the hospital, as the team has been expecting, because the death of the father is the door through which the Inception must pass. Fisher's grief is the emotional terrain through which the idea must be routed, the tender and specific ground that the planted conviction must grow from. Cobb's analysis of Fisher, the relationship between the father and the son, the specific nature of whatever failure or distance or inadequacy existed between them, is the intellectual preparation for an emotional surgery. He needs to know where Fisher hurts in relation to his father, because the idea must be planted in that hurt. An idea planted in the intellect is easily dislodged. An idea planted in grief, in love, in the relationship between a child and a parent. That idea has roots. On the plane, they put Fisher to sleep. Yusuf administers the compound. The team goes under. The first level of Fisher's dream is a city in rain, a city that looks like New York, but feels slightly more arbitrary in its arrangement, slightly more constructed, a city that has the quality of a place assembled from available materials rather than grown over time. This is the first level, the top of the dream stack, the layer where the team has 6 hours of dream time to work within. Cobb's role on the first level is coordinator. He is the one who knows the full architecture of what they are attempting and who manages the movement of the operation from level to level. Arthur's role is to manage the first level while the others go deeper. Eames's role is to begin his forgery work, to appear in Fisher's dream as a person Fisher trusts, a person whose presence and advice will begin nudging Fisher toward the emotional terrain where the idea can be planted. The first level is also where the complications begin. Fisher's mind, which has been trained against extraction, as Cobb noted in the planning stages, and which has therefore developed a specific kind of subconscious defense against dream world intrusion, responds to the team's presence. Fisher's projections begin to mobilize. In a normal dream extraction, the dreamer's projections, the people and things that the dreaming mind populates its world with, are essentially passive scenery, the background population of the dream city going about the dream city's business. In a trained mind, the projections are militarized. They respond to the intrusion of foreign agents in the dream, the way that an immune system responds to a pathogen. They identify the foreign element and they mobilize against it. The team is in an armored vehicle on the streets of the first level when the militarized projections find them, and the vehicle is suddenly in a running fight through the dream city's streets while simultaneously being driven in the waking world by Yusuf, who is behind the wheel of a real van on a real road above the dream. The synchronization is beginning already. The van's movement in the waking world produces variations in the gravity of the first-level dream, the dream's physical environment responding to the real vehicle's motion with tilts and lurches, and the specific quality of a world whose rules are dependent on something happening in a layer above it. Arthur is holding the first level, managing the dream environment, keeping it stable enough for the others to work in, while Cobb and Eames have moved Fisher to a situation where Eames can begin the forgery. The forgery at this level is of a man named Browning, Fisher's godfather and chief financial advisor. A man that Fisher's dreaming mind would expect to find in circumstances of crisis. Eames, in Browning's appearance and with Browning's voice and Browning's specific mannerisms, tells Fisher something, plants a small seed, a first step in the longer sequence that the Inception requires, a direction without a destination yet. The van goes off the bridge. It is the kick for the first level, and the team goes under, deeper, into the second level of the dream, taking Fisher with them. The second level is a hotel. The hotel is Arthur's construction. He is the one staying at the first level to maintain it, so the architecture of the second level falls to his planning rather than to Ariadne's new design work. And the hotel is a clean, geometric space that has the quality of something designed by someone who thinks in orderly systems and who has produced an orderly environment. It is a hotel corridor, a hotel room, a hotel lobby, the specific repetitive architecture of the International Hotel that exists as its own kind of nowhere. A space designed to be comfortable and recognizable to people from everywhere and therefore belonging completely to nowhere. In the hotel, the rules of gravity become the problem, because the van falling in the level above has removed gravity from the level below. The hotel tilts, and then the hotel has no down, the corridor becoming a space where the vertical axis has been removed and the inhabitants must navigate through the furniture and the architecture in any orientation that presents itself. Arthur fights Fisher's security projections in the hotel corridor in zero gravity, and the fighting in zero gravity has a specific quality that is different from the fighting in the first level's rain-slick streets. It is slower, more spatial, less about speed and more about the management of orientation, about finding purchase on walls and floors and ceilings, in a space where all of them are equivalent. Cobb and Eames and Yusuf and Fisher have gone deeper. They are in the third level, the snow fortress. The third level is Eames's architecture, a mountain fortress in a snowstorm, a space designed for the specific theatrical requirements of the final stage of the Inception. The job at this level is to get Fisher into the right emotional space and to the right physical location within the dream, a room that corresponds to a room from Fisher's childhood memory, a room that contains a safe, and in the safe a last will and testament that his father never actually wrote, but that the Inception will make Fisher believe he has discovered. The will's message, that the father wanted the son to be his own man, not a continuation of the father's creation, is the planted idea, routed through Fisher's grief and his relationship with his father into the emotional core where it will take root. But Mal is there. Mal appears in the third level with the force that she has always had in Cobb's dreams, present, specific, invested with the complete reality of a person rather than the thin reality of a projection. And she shoots Fisher. In the dream, she shoots him. Being shot in a dream does not simply wake you up. Being shot in a dream, on the compound that Yusuf has prepared, drops you into limbo, into the unconstructed dream space below all the levels, the raw and unformed territory of the shared subconscious that exists beneath every dream layer, where time runs at a ratio that makes even the extended ratios of the dream levels look brief. Limbo is where you go when you die in the dream while sedated beyond a certain threshold. Limbo is where you can be lost. Fisher is in limbo. Cobb and Ariadne go down to get him. The going down is a choice that only Cobb can make. Ariadne chooses to go with him, but the decision to go to limbo is a decision that no one else on the team would make, because limbo is where Cobb has been before and where things happen to him that are the deepest context for everything in the film. He has been to limbo. His wife went to limbo. What happened to Mal in limbo is the buried center of the film. The thing that Ariadne has been quietly learning about Cobb through the process of working with him and the process of observing what Mal's projection does in his dreams. Limbo, when they arrive in it, is a city on the water, a city that Cobb built long ago when he and Mal were in limbo together for what felt to them like 50 years. They built the city together out of the raw material of the shared subconscious, constructing an entire world in a place where construction is unlimited because the place has no prior construction and no rules. It was a city of their imagining, built over the apparent span of decades, an entire world created by two people who had time and the capacity and who were together in it. And then they needed to leave. The leaving required an inception. This is the film's most important revelation. And it is placed here in the deepest level of the film's structure, which is exactly where it belongs. Cobb performed Inception on his own wife. He planted the idea in Mal's mind, the idea that the world she had been living in was not real, that reality was somewhere above her, that she needed to get back to it. Because Mal had been in limbo so long that she no longer believed the real world was real. She had forgotten which world was the dream. She had built her life in the dream city with the completeness of someone who had decided that the dream city was home, and the idea that home was somewhere else, that the real world was waiting above the dream levels, had to be planted in her because she could not find it herself. The inception worked. They woke up. They came back to the real world. And Mal carried the idea with her. The planted idea, the idea that the world she was in was not real, that reality was somewhere else. And she never let it go. The idea that Cobb had planted in the dream did not stay in the dream. It came back with her. And in the real world, with the real world's reality all around her, Mal still believed that she was in a dream, still believed that reality was somewhere above her, still tried to find the kick that would take her there. She went to the ledge of a hotel room on a high floor, and she stood on the ledge and she asked Cobb to stand on the ledge with her, and she told him that the only way out was down, and she stepped off. This is the weight that Cobb has been carrying. Not the legal charge of her death, which is the surface consequence. The actual weight. He planted the idea that killed her. He did Inception on his wife. And the Inception succeeded more completely than he intended, and she died because of it. And the idea that killed her, the idea that the world might not be real, that reality might be a layer above wherever you is the idea that he carries in himself and that he cannot put down. That Mal's projection in his dreams embodies and returns to him every time he goes under. He cannot stop testing reality. He cannot fully trust the top. He spins the top and he watches it, but he does not always wait to see if it falls. Ariadne knows this now. She knows it because she has been in his dreams, because she has seen what Mal's projection does, because she has built the mirror room and seen the wrong reflection, because she has been paying attention in the way that intelligent young people pay attention when they are encountering something that does not add up, and they want to know what is beneath the surface of it. She is in limbo with him, and she knows the whole of it. They find Fisher in the city Cobb built. They find the room they need. Ariadne helps Fisher reach the safe, and what Fisher finds in it is the will his father never wrote. And what Fisher feels when he reads it is the thing the Inception was designed to produce. The sense that his father wanted him to be free of the Empire, wanted him to be his own person, loved him in a way that the distance between them never permitted him to express directly. The emotion is real. The idea it carries is planted. Fisher is going to wake from the dream with a new conviction that he will believe is his own. Ariadne kicks Fisher back up through the levels. She goes back herself. She leaves Cobb in limbo, because Cobb still has something to do there. He still has to find Saito. Saito went to limbo when he was shot in the first level, shot by Fisher's security projections in the early chaos of the dream mission. The wound he took being, in the logic of the compound, enough to send him down rather than up. He has been in limbo for what has felt, to him, like decades, while the rest of the team has been working through the dream levels above. He is old when Cobb finds him. Old in the way of someone who has been somewhere for a very long time. In a house on the water that has accumulated the quality of a life lived out in it, surrounded by the objects and the textures of a long habitation. He has been waiting in the way that people wait when they have been somewhere so long that the waiting has become indistinguishable from being. Cobb sits with him. He reminds Saito of who they are, of the arrangement they made, of what is waiting above the limbo layer, the world, the real world, the deal, the possibility of going home. He asks Saito to take a leap of faith with him, to come back up, to trust that what is above limbo is real. He spins the top on the table. He picks up the gun that is on the table beside them. The film cuts. They are on the plane. The team is on the plane, all of them, waking from the dream with the specific quality of people returning from somewhere far away, the light of the cabin around them and the hum of the engines, and the particular quality of the world above the clouds that is real and seeming solid and present in the way of things that have not been constructed. Fisher wakes, and he is changed. The Inception has worked. The idea is in him, planted in his grief for his father, and growing there with the roots that grief provides. Saito wakes. He is old on the plane, aged by the decades in limbo, looking at Cobb with the eyes of a very old man who has come back from somewhere that is hard to come back from, and he makes a phone call. Cobb's father-in-law meets him at the Los Angeles airport. The charges are gone. He can go home. He passes through customs and immigration with the ease of someone who has no obstacle and the fear of someone who has been approaching this moment for long enough that the approach itself has become the condition, And the absence of the obstacle is almost harder to process than the obstacle was. He is in the house. His children are in the garden. He sees them from the back, and then they turn and they have faces. They're real faces. The faces he has been seeing in memory from behind, but that memory has protected from the specificity that would make the loss too direct. He calls to them and they turn, and they run to him and he holds them. And the feeling of holding them is the feeling the film has been building toward from the first frame. But he spins the top first. He takes the totem from his pocket, and he spins it on the kitchen counter, and he goes to his children without waiting to see if it falls. The camera stays on the top. The top spins. It wobbles. A wobble, very slightly. The wobble that a top produces when it is about to slow and fall. And then the film cuts to black. The assembling of the team is not a sequence the film moves through quickly, because the team is the instrument that the job requires, and the job is the most complex and most dangerous thing that any of them will have attempted, and the instrument must be precisely calibrated before it can be used. Cobb approaches each potential member with the specific pitch of someone who has done this before, who knows what this kind of work requires, and who is selecting for the specific qualities that the job's specific demands need. He is not looking for the most skilled person available in each category. He is looking for the right person, the person whose particular combination of skill and disposition and willingness to take the risk that this specific job entails is what the job needs. Eames he finds in Mombasa, in a casino, where Eames is running a forgery operation of a different and less speculative kind, the kind that involves marked cards and table positioning, rather than the impersonation of people inside other people's dreams. Eames is a compact, unhurried man who has the quality of someone who has been in many different situations and who approaches new ones with the specific readiness of someone who has learned that situations are navigable and that the navigation requires attention rather than alarm. He and Cobb have the easy familiarity of people who have worked together before and who have a genuine mutual regard, not warmth exactly, not friendship in the domestic sense, but the particular affection of two professionals who respect each other's work and who are glad to be in the same operation. He agrees to the job with the kind of considered swiftness of someone who has already assessed the risk before Cobb has finished explaining it. The chase through Mombasa. When Cobb, after a meeting with Eames, is found by Cobol Engineering's men, the people who hired him for the job that the film's opening sequences showed going wrong, is the film's most ground-level action sequence, the most physically immediate, the one that takes place entirely in the real world, rather than in any constructed dream space, and that therefore has none of the dream's visual flourishes, none of the architectural impossibility. It is a chase through narrow streets, and over rooftops, and into the compressed spaces of a market, with Cobb running in the specific way of someone who is being chased by people he knows are not bound by the ordinary constraints of official pursuit, who can do things to him that official pursuers would not do. Saito appears in a car at the end of the alley, and Cobb gets in. And the chase ends in the way that chases in this film's world end. Not with capture or escape in the clean sense, but with the intervention of the larger arrangement that the film is inside. The arrangement between Cobb and Saito that makes Cobb's freedom contingent on the job's success. Yusuf's shop in Mombasa is the film's most quietly extraordinary location. A basement room below the chemist's pharmacy reached through a door in the back of a back room where a group of old people lie in reclining chairs connected to a single PASIV device, sharing a dream that they return to every day because the dream, for them, is more real than the waking world. Yusuf shows Cobb this room with the specific quality of a person showing someone something that they know will affect them, that they know touches something in the person they are showing. And Cobb stands in the room among the dreaming old people and asks the attendant how long they have been coming. Years, the attendant says. They come to be in the dream. The dream is their real world. Coming up is the dream. This is a rehearsal for the film's later revelation about Mal, and it is placed here deliberately, placed in the preparation section, so that the audience has the image of the dreaming old people in the basement when the story of Mal and Limbo arrives later. The old people in Yusuf's basement are people who have found in the shared dream something that the waking world does not provide them, and who have over time inverted the ordinary relationship between reality and dream, preferring the constructed world to the given one. Mal did this in Limbo. The film is asking in both cases whether the inversion is a failure or a choice, whether preferring the dream to the waking world is simply wrong, or whether it is the response of a person whose waking world has failed to provide what they need. Cobb's meeting with Professor Miles in Paris, his father-in-law, the man who is caring for his children in his absence and who represents the legitimate world, the world of university halls and cafe tables, and the ordinary concerns of academic life that Cobb has been exiled from, has the quality of a conversation between two people who have a long and complicated history together and who have found, after the complicated history, a way to be present to each other that holds the complication without being defined by it. Miles gives Cobb Ariadne. He recommends her with the specific warmth of a teacher recommending a student whose abilities he knows well and whose suitability for the work he trusts his own judgment about. And the recommendation has in it something more than professional confidence. It has the quality of a gift from someone who loves Cobb and who understands that what Cobb needs is not just a good architect, but a person of genuine moral intelligence. Someone who will see what the rest of the team will not see and say what the rest of the team will not say. Ariadne's first introduction to the dream world is the cafe in Paris. They are sitting at a table, a real table in a real cafe, in the real afternoon. And Cobb asks her to close her eyes. And when she opens them, they are in a version of the same cafe that is not the real cafe, that is more saturated in its colors, and more still in its textures, and more present in its specific physical details than the real cafe was, because the dream is compensating for reality with the specific intensity of compensation that dreams provide. She does not know she is in a dream initially. She does not know what has happened. And then she begins to understand, begins to feel the quality of the dream differently from the quality of the world she was in a moment before. And the understanding that she is in a dream arrives in her with the excitement rather than the fear of someone who has found a domain that matches them. She begins to change things. She does it tentatively at first. A small alteration, a wall where there was no wall, watching to see what the dream does when the dreamer's intention reshapes it, and then with growing confidence as the dream responds, as the rules of the dream environment reveal themselves as responsive to the architect's will in a way that no physical environment can be responsive. She folds the cafe in on itself. She builds a bridge across the Seine from nothing. She creates a staircase that loops back on itself in the specific way of an Escher drawing. Stairs that go up that are the same stairs that go down. A structure that contradicts the physics of the waking world, and that works in the dream because the dream's physics are the architect's physics, subject to revision and reconstruction in ways that the waking world resists. Cobb watches her with the specific attention of a very skilled person watching someone else encounter their skill for the first time. The attention of someone who knows what this looks like when it goes well, and who can see that this is going well, who is calibrating his assessment in real time as she demonstrates what she is. He is also, beneath this attention, doing the other thing he is always doing in the dream world, watching for Mal. She comes in the form she always comes in, the specific physical form of his wife, with the particular quality of her presence that no projection he has ever encountered in any dream has had before, and that makes her immediately and painfully recognizable as something other than ordinary dream content. She approaches. Ariadne sees her. She stabs Ariadne's dream hand with a knife, and this is Mal doing what Mal always does in Cobb's dreams, making herself the thing that cannot be ignored, the wound in the dream that cannot be healed by ordinary dream logic, the presence that insists on being present. Ariadne wakes with the shock of being hurt in the dream hurt being real hurt, as the rules establish. And she is back in the real cafe with the specific quality of someone who has been somewhere and returned, and who is not entirely sure what to do with the fact of the return. She came out. She is alive. She is sitting at a real table in real Paris with an ice cube on her hand where the dream knife landed, and Cobb across from her with the expression of someone who has done this too many times to be distressed by it, but who is not, in this moment, without feeling about what happened. She comes back. She wants to come back. This is what the film needs from its point of entry character, and what Ariadne provides. The genuine fascination with the work, the desire to understand it, the intellectual and creative appetite for the domain that the dream world represents. She is not simply doing the job because she has been asked. She is doing it because the dream world is, for her creative intelligence, a space of extraordinary possibility, a canvas where the ordinary constraints of the physical world are not constraints, and where what can be built is limited only by what can be imagined. She builds. The film gives us several sequences of Ariadne building dream environments in the construct, the white practice space where the team develops and tests the architecture that will be used in the real dream. And these sequences have the specific quality of watching someone work who is getting better in real time, who is moving from technically proficient to genuinely creative. She builds the waterfall city, a city in which the streets are water channels where the specific logic of water moving through urban space has been made the organizing principle of the entire built environment. She builds environments that use the dream's freedom from physical constraint to create spaces that are beautiful in the specific way that spaces are beautiful when they follow an internal logic without being required to follow the logic of physics. The paradox staircase is her most important contribution to the operational architecture. It is a staircase built on the Penrose stair principle. Each flight goes up, and the stairs arrive at a level higher than they started, and the next flight goes up again, and the stairs arrive at a level higher than that, and this continues. And after 4 flights of ascending stairs, you are back where you began. This is physically impossible in the waking world. In the dream, where the architecture obeys the architect's intention rather than the laws of physics, it is simply a feature of the space, a loop that Fisher's security projections in a chase will run in indefinitely, always ascending and never arriving anywhere different. It is a trap built from logic, a prison made of the dream's own rules turned back on themselves. She explains it to Arthur, who looks at it and smiles with the appreciation of a person who understands both the elegance of the concept and its practical utility. The planning sessions in the hotel room in Paris, the team gathered around tables covered with Fisher's file, maps of the dream levels, chemical diagrams from Yusuf, architectural sketches from Ariadne, have the quality of a heist preparation sequence, with the specific distinction that the heist is being planned for locations that do not yet exist and that will be created by the team members themselves during the execution. They are not planning a break-in to a real building with a real floor plan. They are planning a 3-level psychological operation whose physical environment will be generated, modified, and managed by members of the team in real time under conditions of active resistance from the dreamer's subconscious. The planning is the architecture of an architecture, the plan for how to build the plan. Cobb explains the Inception structure in terms that the team and the audience can track. The idea must be planted at the deepest level and must originate, from Fisher's perspective, from the most personal and most emotionally resonant place available. An idea that arrives as an instruction is not inception. An idea that arrives as a rational argument is not inception. An idea is incepted when the person receiving it discovers it as though it were already within them, when they come to it through their own emotional process, when it feels like the conclusion of a journey they have been on rather than the destination someone else had pointed them toward. The inception of Fisher must make Fisher feel that the idea to dissolve his father's empire is his own idea, that it arose from his own grief and his own love and his own understanding of what his father wanted, that it is the most authentic expression of his own deepest values. Eames's role is the hinge. As the forger, he appears in the first level as Browning, Fisher's godfather, the trusted advisor, and plants the first seed, a whispered suggestion that the dying father has secrets, that there is a hidden will, that Browning himself knows about a plan of Maurice Fisher's that he has been asked to keep from Robert. This is not the full idea. This is the beginning of the path toward the full idea, the first step in a sequence that will draw Fisher downward through the levels toward the room where the will can be found and the idea can arrive in him as though it were already there. The second level of Eames's forgery is Browning again, but this time used differently, used as the negative example, the person whose advice the inception is designed to counteract, so that when Fisher, in the third level, discovers the will and its message about his father's wishes, He is already primed to see Browning as the voice that was keeping him from the truth, rather than guiding him toward it. The forgery is not just performance. It is the construction of a specific emotional trajectory for Fisher, a path through attitudes and realizations that arrives at the planted conviction as though the path were natural. Fisher himself is presented by the film as more than a mark, as a person who has a real and complex emotional relationship with his father, a real grief, real questions about what he was to his father and what his father wanted for him. The film takes time to show Fisher's dream versions of these things: the hospital where the dying father is, the room that corresponds to a room from Fisher's childhood, the safe in the room, not as props in the heist, but as the actual emotional furniture of a person's inner life. The Inception works because there is something true in what it finds. Fisher's father probably did want something for his son that the Empire prevented him from expressing directly. The planted will is not an arbitrary falsehood. It is an idea that has the specific quality of the best lies, the quality of a thing that could be true, that fits the emotional reality, even if it is not the factual reality, that resonates because it touches something the person already half-out believed. The dream militarization, Fisher's security projections, trained and armed and responsive, is both a practical obstacle and a thematic statement. The mind protects itself. The subconscious does not welcome intrusion. When someone has been trained to understand the possibility of dream work being used against them, the training produces an immune response in the dreaming mind that is automatic and vigorous and does not distinguish between beneficial and malicious intent. Fisher's projections are not protecting him from a bad idea. They are protecting him from any external imposition on his mind, which is the same reflex, whether the imposition is extraction or inception, whether the people at the doors are trying to take something or leave something. The mind's defenses are not that discriminating. They attack the foreign agent regardless of what the foreign agent intends. This is the element of the film's moral structure that the heist genre overlay tends to obscure. What Cobb and his team are doing to Fisher is something that Fisher would not consent to if he were asked. They are entering his mind without his knowledge or permission and rearranging its convictions at the deepest level available to them. The planted idea will change the course of his life. He will dissolve his father's company in the genuine belief that this is what his father wanted, in the genuine belief that this dissolution is the most authentic expression of his own values, never knowing that the belief was manufactured and the conviction was installed. The film does not ask the audience to condemn this. It asks the audience to be complicit in it, to root for the team, to want the Inception to succeed, to feel the satisfaction of the job well done. This complicity is itself a kind of Inception. The audience leaves the film having been made to want something they might not have wanted if they had been asked in advance whether they wanted it. The Snow Fortress sequence in the third level is the film's most theatrical environment, the most deliberately constructed, the most openly artificial, because Eames has built it for theatrical purposes. It is a James Bond villain's compound, essentially, rendered with the specific aesthetic of that genre, because Eames understands that the deeper you go into the dreaming mind, the more archetypal the imagery becomes, the more the dream draws on cultural material rather than personal memory, the more the environment becomes a set rather than a place. The snow and the guns and the fortress and the storm are the vocabulary of a genre that Fisher's subconscious recognizes, and Eames is using that recognition to move Fisher through the sequence with the efficiency of someone who knows which emotional buttons the genre's imagery presses. Mal's intervention at the third level, the moment when she shoots Fisher, is the most consequential of all her intrusions across the film's dream sequences. She has appeared before in the first level and in the preparation dreams, always with the same specific quality of something foreign in the architecture, something that the architect did not put there, something that belongs to Cobb rather than to the shared dream. In the first level, she appeared in the burning building sequence that the film showed in the preparation stages, a fragment of a prior dream of Cobb's, a moment from a level of the dream that has the quality of a memory rather than a construction. In the third level, she has a weapon and she uses it. And the using of it is the clearest statement the film makes about the danger of Cobb's specific condition. The unresolved guilt is not just a personal burden. It is a professional liability. It is a thing that acts in the world of the dream, that does things to other people, that compromises the operation and puts lives at risk. The hospital room in the third level, the room that corresponds to Fisher's childhood memory, the room in the snow fortress that contains the dying father, is the film's most emotionally careful scene. Fisher approaches it through the sequence of discoveries that the Inception has arranged. The found will, the whispered hints, the growing sense that there is something his father wanted to tell him that was never said. He opens the safe in the room. He finds the will. He reads it. And the thing that happens in Fisher in this room is the thing that the Inception was designed to produce. Not the reading of a document, but the experience of a relationship. The experience of being loved by a father in a way that the father could not express directly. The experience of being seen and released and told that he is enough. The emotion is real. It is produced by something false, by a will that does not exist, by a room that was built for this purpose, by a team of people who have managed his dreaming mind toward this specific moment. But the emotion itself, in the man who feels it, is entirely real, and the conviction that grows from it will be entirely real, and the consequences for his life will be entirely real. This is the Inception's success and its deepest ethical complexity. It works by making something false feel true, but the feeling is the truth that matters. Fisher will spend the rest of his life believing that dissolving the empire was his own idea, that it came from his love for his father and his father's love for him, and this belief will be indistinguishable in his experience from any other belief he holds that he knows to be genuine. The Inception does not leave a trace. There is no scar, no tell, no way for Fisher or anyone else to distinguish the planted conviction from the convictions that grew naturally in the course of his life. The cleanness of the operation is its most troubling quality. It is so clean that it cannot be undone, so thorough that it cannot be distinguished from the real, so complete that the person who received it has no way of knowing that they received it. The emotional parallelism between Fisher and Cobb runs through the film's final act with a care that the action sequences tend to occupy attention away from, but that the film has been careful to construct. Both men are working through unresolved relationships with fathers. Fisher with his actual father, Cobb with his father-in-law, Miles, who is the closest thing in the film gives him to a paternal figure in the absence of his own family. Both men are being helped by people who understand their situation better than they understand it themselves, and who have arranged for them to encounter what they need to encounter. Both men come through the experience changed, though one of them is changed by an inception, and the other is changed by the process of carrying it out. The film rhymes these two characters across its structure and then allows each to arrive at his resolution without making the parallel explicit. The return from limbo is the film's most clearly allegorical sequence. Cobb has been in limbo before. He knows its geography. He built the city that he and Mal lived in there. He knows what it costs to stay and what it costs to leave. When he finds Saito in the city on the water, the finding has the quality of a person returning to a place they have been trying to leave for a long time. Returning not because they want to, but because the returning is the only way through. He finds Saito old, and the oldness is the oldness of decades spent in limbo, the decades that the temporal ratios produce at the deepest level of the dream. He sits with Saito in the house, and the sitting has the quality of two people at the end of a very long story, both of them carrying the weight of what the story has cost them, both of them at the moment when the story can either end or continue. The leap of faith that Cobb asks of Saito is the same leap that the film has been asking its audience to make throughout its running time. To trust that what is above the level you are currently in is real. To act on that trust without being able to verify it before the action is taken. The trust cannot be verified in advance. The verification only comes after the leap, if it comes at all. This is the structure of faith as the film understands it. Not the faith of certainty, not the faith of evidence, but the faith of choosing to act as though the thing you cannot prove is true, because the acting as though is the only way to find out, and because the not acting is a kind of death of a different kind. The synchronization of the kicks, the coordinated return of all dream levels to the level above, timed so that the team returns together and in the right order, is the most technically complex element of the plan and the element that requires the most trust between team members. Arthur manages the first level kick while in free fall. He moves the sleeping bodies of the dreamers through the zero-gravity hotel corridor and arranges them in the elevator and sets up the explosive charge that will provide the kick, all while conducting the ongoing fight with Fisher's security projections, all while the van is still in the air above the water in the real world, and the window for the kick is measured in seconds of real time that correspond to hours in the dream levels. The precision required is the precision of an operation where every element is dependent on every other element, and where the failure of any single element constitutes the failure of the whole. The moments after Cobb passes through customs at the Los Angeles airport and collects his passport and moves toward the exit have the specific quality of a person experiencing the removal of a chronic burden in real time. The physical lightness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for long enough that they have stopped feeling the weight and who feels it removed as an absence that is larger than expected, as an opening rather than simply a relief. The airport is real and present and full of people who are doing the ordinary things that people do in airports, and Cobb moves through them with the quality of someone who is acutely aware that these ordinary things are available to him now in a way they have not been available, that the ordinary world is accessible to him again, that the long exile is over. His father-in-law is waiting on the other side. The exchange between them at the arrivals area is brief. A look, a nod, the specific quality of a reunion between two people who have a great deal to say to each other and who are not going to say most of it in an airport, but who convey in the briefness of the exchange everything that needs to be conveyed. Miles has been waiting for this. He brought Ariadne to Cobb, not just because Ariadne was the right person for the job, but because Miles understands Cobb, and understands what Cobb needs and believes that the job, done right, is the thing that can give it to him. The giving of Ariadne is Miles's version of the leap of faith, trusting that the right person at the right moment can be the catalyst for the transformation that has been waiting to happen. The house that Cobb comes back to is familiar, in the way of a place you know from memory rather than from recent experience. Familiar with the slight foreignness of remembered things that have been out of reach for long enough that the memory and the reality have diverged slightly, that the memory has smoothed and simplified and made more golden than the real thing was. He moves through it with the quality of someone reacquainting, running his hand along surfaces he knows, looking at objects that have waited in the same positions for years. He spins the top. He goes to the door. He calls his children's names. They are in the garden. The top on the kitchen counter, spinning in the empty room, continues to spin in the space of the film's final seconds with the wobble that is and is not the beginning of the fall. The wobble is real. It is there. It is not imagined. The top is showing the physical behavior of a top approaching the end of its spin. And it is ambiguous, because tops wobble before they fall, and tops sometimes wobble, and then stabilize, and then fall later, and the film does not give us later. The camera holds. The top spins, the screen goes dark. The question this leaves is the question the film has been asking from its first frames, and the not answering of it is the film's most deliberate and most considered choice. Nolan has said that the question of whether Cobb is dreaming at the end is not the question he is interested in. The question he's interested in is the question of Cobb's state of mind, of whether Cobb has arrived at a place where the testing matters less than the living. The top wobbles, and Cobb has already left the room. He is in the garden with his children. Whatever the top is doing, he has chosen not to wait for it. The children's faces, the faces that the film has protected throughout its running time, showing them only from behind and in fleeting glimpses, in the dream memories that Cobb returns to, in the moments when the grief is closest, are visible at the end. They have always been visible in Cobb's dream memories, but always as they were at a specific moment in the past, frozen at the age they were when he last saw them, playing in the same garden, in the same clothes, in the same afternoon light. The children in the garden at the end are different. They are older. Time has passed in the real world while Cobb has been working, and the children have been living their real lives in real time, and they are not the children from the frozen memory. This is the clearest signal the film provides that Cobb is in the real world. The children are not the same as the children in the memory. The real world is the world where the children have grown, where time has moved, where things have changed in the ways that things in the real world change. The story of Cobb and Mal in limbo. The story that the film holds back until its third act, releasing it in the deepest level of the dream sequence at the moment when the full weight of it can be received, is the film's most essential piece of backstory, and the withholding of it is the film's most important structural decision. Everything about Cobb's situation in the film, the exile, the legal charge, the projection, the refusal to use someone else's totem, the specific way he handles questions about his wife, is meaningful before we know the full story, but becomes much more specifically meaningful once we know it. The film is designed to be rewatched, and what the rewatch provides, above everything else, is the experience of seeing all of Cobb's earlier behavior with full knowledge of what it means. He performed Inception on his wife. He did it because he had to. Because Mal was lost in limbo. Because she had been in limbo long enough that she no longer believed the real world was real. Because the only way to bring her back was to give her the idea that reality existed above the dream. He did it with the full knowledge of what Inception requires, and the belief in the moment that the benefits outweighed the risks. He opened her totem, her spinning top, her own personal instrument for testing reality, which she kept in a locked box in a dollhouse in a dream room of the limbo city they had built together. And he spun it, and he buried it inside the safe in the dollhouse, and he told her, in the dream, that the top would not fall, and that if the top would not fall, the world was not real, and that they had to get back to reality. He planted the idea with the specific precision of someone who understands the mechanics of Inception and who is applying them to the person he loves most. The idea took. They woke up. They came back to the real world, their real world, the world of their house and their children, and their lives together, which should have been the ending of the story. The successful completion of the most difficult thing either of them had ever attempted, the return from a place that people do not return from. But the idea came back with Mal, rooted in the deepest level of her convictions, indistinguishable from her own beliefs, carrying the full emotional force of the genuine conviction that it was now generating in her. The idea that the world was not real, and that reality was somewhere above wherever she was, this idea, planted in limbo, had become her fundamental orientation toward waking life. She could not put it down. She could not verify that the real world was real. The totem she had been spinning in limbo to check for the spinning forever behavior of the dream now spun and fell in the waking world as it should, as real tops do. But Mal had been in limbo when Cobb buried the idea in her top, and the burying of the idea in the top had changed her relationship to the tops falling. She did not trust the fall. She did not trust the evidence. She had an idea planted at the deepest level of her mind that told her the evidence was fabricated. Cobb knew this. He watched it happen. He watched the woman he loved struggle with the idea he had planted, watched her try to find the reality that the idea told her was above the world they were in, watched her desperation increase as the waking world provided evidence she could not trust. He took her to psychiatrists, and they gave her diagnoses that were correct in the phenomenological sense. She was expressing the symptoms of a specific disorder, but that were wrong in the etiological sense, wrong about the cause, unable to help, because no psychiatric intervention addresses the specific condition of a person who has had an idea planted in their subconscious by someone who knows how to plant ideas in subconsciousnesses. He kept what he knew from the psychiatrists and from everyone else because what he knew was not a diagnosis that the medical system could work with. It was a confession. The hotel room where Mal died is a room that Cobb has been carrying since he left it. He recreates it in his dreams, not deliberately, not as a choice, but in the way that grief recreates things, automatically compulsively, returning to the specific physical space of the worst thing that happened because the mind cannot leave it, cannot process it, cannot put it down. The room is always there in his dream world, available to him in the dreams where Mal appears, waiting in the architecture of his subconscious as the specific location of the loss. He knows it is there. He cannot remove it. The knowing of what he did to Mal is in him the way that the idea about reality was in Mal, planted at a level below the level of simple decision, too deep to be removed by simply deciding to remove it. The projection of Mal that appears in his dreams is not Mal. He knows this. He says it directly, at several points in the film, in the way that someone says a thing they need to keep saying because the alternative, allowing the projection to stand in for the person it resembles, is not something they can afford. The projection is his memory of her, his guilt about her, his desire for her, his grief for her, all of these things assembled into a figure that has borrowed her face and her voice and her specific way of being present in a room. It is the most convincing and the most dangerous projection he has ever encountered because it is his own, because it is made of his own material, because it knows everything that he knows about Mal and uses that knowledge to be as fully Mal as anything that is not Mal can be. She argues with him. This is what makes her different from ordinary projections, which populate the dream as background and do not engage the dreamer in dialogue. She makes arguments. She tells him that the real world is the dream, that the dream is the real world, that the way home is down rather than up. The same argument she made to him on the hotel ledge. The argument that the Inception produced in her and that cost her her life, now reconfigured as the argument that his own guilt is making against him. She is not Mal making this argument. She is Cobb's guilt making this argument in Mal's voice. And the guilt is very good at this because guilt knows everything that the person it lives in knows. The hotel ledge scene, the scene that the film holds until the third act, releasing it in Ariadne's limbo visit, when Ariadne finally knows enough to understand what she is seeing, is the film's most painful sequence. We see Cobb and Mal on separate ledges, outside hotel windows, high above the city. We hear what Mal is saying to him. We understand that what Mal is saying is the argument of the Inception she received. The argument that to get back to reality, you must go off the ledge. That going off the ledge is the kick, the return, the way home. We understand that Cobb cannot go off the ledge with her and cannot stop her from going off the ledge herself. That the argument she is making is one that his own deepest knowledge of dream work tells him is wrong, but that his love for her and his knowledge of what he did to her makes him unable to simply dismiss. He stays on his ledge. She goes off hers. The film shows this once and does not return to it. Arthur's management of the second level during the zero-gravity sequence is the film's most sustained demonstration of practical skill under extreme conditions. Extreme meaning not simply dangerous, but physically disorienting in a way that removes the ordinary toolkit of a trained fighter and requires improvisation at every moment. The corridor rotates. The floor becomes the wall. The ceiling becomes the floor. The furniture slides and falls and becomes an obstacle in all directions simultaneously. Arthur fights in this environment with the specific quality of someone who has done enough of this kind of work that the disorientation does not overwhelm the training, who can redirect the training in real time as the physical parameters change, who finds in the rotating corridor not a disaster, but a different kind of problem to be solved. He assembles the sleeping bodies of the team in the elevator, moving them through the rotating corridor, securing them for the kick, managing the logistics of the bodies that cannot move themselves through a space that is constantly changing its orientation. With the specific focus of someone whose entire attention is on the task and who does not have the luxury of attention for anything else. He is also conducting the ongoing fight with Fisher's security projections in this environment, managing multiple requirements simultaneously in a space that keeps changing its rules. The sequence is the film's most purely kinetic, and it is also the film's fullest portrait of Arthur as a professional. Not the romantic figure that Cobb is, not the creative intelligence that Ariadne is, but the person who makes the operation work at the level of practical execution, who manages the details that the larger strategy depends on. Now that the story has gently unfolded, it can be interesting to reflect on some of the ideas behind the film and what it was reaching toward in its long and patient telling. Inception is a film about the architecture of belief, about how ideas take root in minds, where they come from, and what it means to have a conviction that feels entirely your own, but might have arrived from somewhere outside you. The inception itself, the planted idea in Robert Fisher's mind, and is the film's plot mechanism, but it is also its central metaphor, and the metaphor applies in directions that go beyond Fisher. The film itself is performing Inception on its audience. Every film does this to some degree. The experience of cinema is the experience of entering a constructed world and allowing it to feel real, allowing the emotions that are produced by events that did not happen to people who do not exist to be felt as genuine emotions rather than simulated ones. But Inception is more deliberate about this than most films, more aware of what it is doing and more interested in the audience's awareness of what is being done to them. The spinning top at the film's end is the most discussed and most persistently argued ending in recent cinema, and it is worth thinking carefully about what it is actually doing. Cobb's totem is the instrument through which he tests reality, the personal object whose behavior in a given moment tells him whether he is in a dream or in the waking world. If the top falls, he's in reality. If it spins forever, he is in a dream. He spins it at the end of the film and goes to his children before it falls. The camera stays on the top, and the top wobbles slightly. The wobble could be the beginning of the fall, or it could be the wobble of a top that is going to go on spinning. The film cuts before the question is resolved. The question the ending asks is not simply whether Cobb is dreaming. It is a more interesting question. Does it matter? Cobb goes to his children without waiting for the answer. He has chosen not to wait. Whatever the top does, he's going to be with his children. And then the being with them is the thing that the film has established as the most real and most important thing in his life. If the children are in a dream, they are still his children. If the love he feels for them is in a dream, it is still love. The film's ending is not a cruel trick that suggests Cobb might be trapped in a dream. It is a statement about the relationship between the question of reality and the experience of meaning. A statement that at some point the testing must stop and the living must begin. That the totem is a tool for survival rather than a tool for happiness. and that happiness requires putting the totem down. The relationship between Cobb and Mal is the film's emotional core, and it is handled with the complexity that the premise requires. Mal is not simply a ghost or a villain or a symbol of grief. She is all of these things, and she is also the most complete embodiment of the film's central problem, the problem of an idea so deeply planted that it cannot be removed even when its source is known and its effects are destructive. Mal's idea, the idea that the world is a dream, that reality is somewhere above wherever she is, was planted by Cobb, and it killed her. And the version of Mal that lives in Cobb's dreams is the continuation of that idea, the idea's personification, the part of Cobb that cannot put down the question she died asking. The guilt that Cobb carries is not the guilt of having killed his wife directly. He did not push her off the ledge. He was not there when she stepped off. But the guilt of having done something to her mind that she could not undo, that she could not choose to undo even if she had wanted to. Because the Inception worked at a level below the level of choice. He gave her an idea, and the idea took hold, and grew and became her fundamental orientation toward the world. And she died because of the idea he gave her. This is a very specific kind of guilt. The guilt of having altered someone so permanently that the alteration became fatal. It is the guilt of a person who did something irreversible with the best of intentions and found that the best of intentions is not protection against the worst of outcomes. Ariadne functions in the film as the audience's point of entry, and also as its conscience, the person who is new to the world of dream work, and who therefore needs everything explained, which allows the film to explain it without the exposition feeling forced, and also the person who is paying close attention to Cobb in a way that the other members of the team are not, who notices what the others have accepted as background condition. The rest of the team knows about Cobb's situation in the abstract. They know he cannot go home, they know his wife is dead, but they have accepted this as context rather than examining it as the live problem that it is. Ariadne examines it. She builds the mirror room and finds Mal in it. She asks questions. She goes to limbo with Cobb, not because she has to, but because she understands that he needs someone who knows the whole truth to be present with him in the most dangerous place the mission takes him, and because she is the only person who has the whole truth to offer. The dream architecture that the film constructs, the layered levels, the nested temporal ratios, the way that physical events in one level produce physical effects in the levels below, is a piece of world building of extraordinary coherence. The rules are explained clearly and consistently, and the film never violates them even in its most spectacular sequences. The hotel corridor fight works within the established logic. Arthur is fighting in the second level, while the first level's van is in free fall, which removes gravity from the second level, which means that Arthur and his opponents must fight in a space without a consistent floor. The sequence is visually extraordinary, and it is also the visual expression of a logical necessity that the film's rule system produces. The spectacle and the logic are the same thing. The film's treatment of time across the dream levels is its most quietly radical formal element. The temporal ratios, 20 minutes of real time to 6 hours of dream time at the first level, 6 hours to a week at the second level, a week to 6 months at the third level, And beyond the third level, into the decades-long timelessness of limbo, produce a situation in which the same events are happening simultaneously at radically different rates. And the film tracks these simultaneous events with a structural precision that most films do not attempt. The van falls off the bridge. The van is in the air above the water for a few seconds of real time. In the first level, those seconds are hours. In the second level, they are days. In the third level, they are months. The team is racing against a deadline that is measured differently at every level at which it operates. And the management of this multi-rate race is the film's most technically ambitious narrative achievement. Eames is the team member who most clearly embodies the film's argument about the relationship between identity and performance. As the forger, he exists within dreams by becoming other people, by taking on the complete surface of another person's presence and inhabiting that surface so convincingly that the dreamer cannot distinguish the forger from the person being forged. This requires a specific kind of talent that is different from the skills of the architect or the chemist or the extractor. It requires the capacity to understand a person from the outside so completely that you can simulate them from the inside, to know how a specific person moves and speaks and holds their face and chooses their words. And to produce all of this in the context of a dream where the dreamer's subconscious is doing constant verification against the baseline of how that person actually seems. The world of professional dream work, the world of extractors and architects and forgers working for corporate interests, the world in which Cobb has been operating since his exile, is presented by the film without much comment on its ethical dimensions, which is a deliberate choice. The film is not interested in litigating whether extraction is immoral. It treats dream work as a profession that exists within a moral context that its practitioners are aware of, and that they navigate in the ways that people in morally complex professions navigate their context, with pragmatism, with the occasional qualm, with the specific calibration that comes from needing to work and needing to live. Cobb's moral reckoning is personal rather than professional. It is about Mal, not about the people whose dreams he has been entering for years without their knowledge or consent. Saito is the most complex figure in the film's supporting cast, precisely because he is both the client and the most immediately mortal member of the mission. The person who has the most to lose if the job fails, and who has taken the greatest personal risk in commissioning it. His decision to enter the dream with the team, rather than simply hiring them and waiting in the waking world, transforms him from employer to participant and changes the moral structure of the arrangement. He has put his own mind and his own life at risk alongside the team's. When he ends up in limbo, the job's most severe consequence falls on the person who ordered it rather than the people who executed it, which is an unusual arrangement in stories about hired work and the people who do it. The film ends as it begins, with the old man and the spinning top and the arriving face, the circuit of the story completing itself in the beach scene that the prologue introduced. This is the film's structural confidence. The opening that does not announce itself as an opening, but presents itself as a fragment of the middle or the end, whose full meaning becomes available only once the whole has been traversed. When the beach scene arrives again at the end of the film's third act, we understand it. This is Saito's limbo. This is the old man who has been in limbo for decades. This is Cobb arriving in limbo to bring him back. This is the moment before the gun and before the leap of faith. and before the waking. The story loops through itself and finds its own beginning inside its own end. And what was opaque at the start has become transparent, and the transparency has the quality of a dream in which everything that seemed random turns out to have been arranged. And so the story of Inception leaves us with the image of a top spinning on a kitchen counter and a man holding his children in a garden, and the question of whether the top will fall open and persistent in the air of the room after the screen goes dark. What the film has been arguing through everything it has built across its careful and patient structure is that the question of whether the top falls is less important than the man who chose to go to his children without waiting for the answer. The dreamer who tests reality indefinitely is the dreamer who never lives. The person who can only love something after its reality has been verified cannot love the way that love requires, which is fully and without the guarantee that the thing loved is exactly what it appears to be. Cobb puts the totem down. He goes to his children. The top spins in the empty kitchen, and whether it falls or not, he is already somewhere else. Rest well. The film's formal structure, the way it uses the nested dream levels to create a genuinely new kind of narrative architecture, is worth thinking about as a formal achievement separate from its thematic content. Most films operate in a single temporal register. Events happen in sequence, time flows in one direction, the audience experiences the film's duration as approximately equivalent to the story's duration, or as a clearly demarcated condensation of it. Inception operates in multiple temporal registers simultaneously, and the multiplicity is not a trick or a flourish, but a genuine formal innovation that the film's story requires. When the van is in the air and the first level is showing us 6 hours of story compressed from 20 minutes of real time, and the second level is showing us days of story compressed from those 6 hours, and the third level is showing us months of story compressed from those days, and Limbo is showing us years compressed from those months. All of these are happening simultaneously. All of them are happening within the same film. And the audience is being asked to hold all of them in awareness simultaneously, and to understand that the events at each level are dependent on events at the levels above and below. This is a narrative structure that has no close precedent in mainstream cinema, and the film accomplishes it with a clarity that means audiences can follow it even on a first viewing without entirely grasping the full architecture that they are now navigating. The PASIVI device, the portable automated somnocin intravenous device, the machine that connects the dreamers and delivers the compound, is the film's most important prop and its most unobtrusive one. It sits on a suitcase or a table, connected to the sleepers by thin tubes, and it hums quietly in the background of every dream entry sequence. It is the technology that makes everything possible, the instrument through which the dream world is accessed and shared and sustained, and the film treats it with the specific kind of matter-of-fact respect that good science fiction gives to its central technologies. It shows you how it works, shows you what it can and cannot do, and then allows the story to depend on it without constantly calling attention to it. The PASI-5 is the door. The door is not the point. What is through the door is the point. The dream city that Cobb built in Limbo with Mal, the city that appears when Cobb and Ariadne go to Limbo in the third act, decaying and overgrown and partially collapsed, the long-abandoned construction of two people who are no longer there, is the film's most melancholy image. It is not a ruin in the ordinary sense, not a city that was destroyed or abandoned in the way of cities that are built and then left. It is a city that was built by an act of will and that is now returning to the raw material of the subconscious from which it was made. The construction dissolving back into the nothing that the subconscious is when it is not being used to build something. Buildings lean. Streets are reclaimed by something like vegetation, though vegetation that has the quality of dream vegetation, growing in ways that vegetation in the waking world does not grow. The whole city has the quality of a love letter that has been left in the rain, still legible, still clearly a love letter, but damaged by the time that has passed since it was written and the weather that has fallen on it since. Cobb walks through the city with the quality of someone who remembers every street and every building and every morning spent building it, and who is walking through his own memory as much as through a physical space. The city is his grief made architectural. It is what the years with Mal looked like from the inside of the shared subconscious, built with love, built together, built with the particular ambition of two people who had time and capacity and each other, and it is collapsing. And he built it in the first place because they were lost, because the dream had become more real to Mal than the reality above it, and the building of the city was both the life they lived in limbo and the reason they needed to get out of it. The symmetry between the film's opening and closing is not accidental. The old man at the table, the spinning top, the arriving face. These images open the film before the audience has any context for understanding them, and they close the film's second act as the revelation that gives the opening its meaning. Between the opening and the moment of revelation, the audience has spent 2 hours inside the story, and the story has provided everything needed to understand the opening images. The structural loop, the way the film's end gives back the film's beginning, is the formal equivalent of the Inception success. The idea was planted in the first frames, and the film's body is the process of growing it. And the recognition that comes at the end is the recognition that the beginning always contained. The final image, the top spinning, the wobble, the cut to black, is the most honest possible ending for a film about the architecture of belief. It does not resolve the question of what is real. It does not need to. The film has spent 2 hours asking the question and showing how the question operates in the life of a specific person. And what it has found is that the question, pursued to its limit, leads to the ledge where Mal stood. The question of what is real, pursued without end, terminates not in knowledge, but in the inability to act, in the paralysis of the person who cannot go to their children because they are waiting for the top to stop. Cobb goes to his children. The top is still spinning when he leaves the kitchen. This is the film's answer, which is not an answer to the question of what is real, but an answer to the question of how to live when the question of what is real cannot be fully resolved. You go to your children. You go to the people you love. You accept that the certainty you want is not available, and you act on the best evidence you have, and you hope that the world is as real as it feels, and you stop waiting for the top. Rest well.